Hello everyone and welcome to the Weekly Wrangle. This week we're going to discover whether or not workshops are a ripoff. And when I say workshops, I mean online videos, online group courses that have some kind of enrollment date that you need to join with. So imagine a group of people getting together online to learn something over a period of time, and usually it's based around some kind of project that's being made over the course of many weeks. So I want to be very specific about how I'm defining workshop here, because we're going to look at the pros and cons of learning in this way. And by the end of this video, you'll have a much better sense of whether or not workshops are right for you. In my opinion, the number one reason why you should consider a workshop is because some projects look really, really cool. And I'm not exaggerating. The projects that some workshops come up with are fantastic. Some of the coolest looking stuff you can find online when it comes to how-to tutorials on specific topics. Now, the reason why I say some is because not all workshops are created equally. And as we'll find, there are some other cons to this. But the bottom line is, when you wake up in the morning and you say, I want to be a VFX artist, and you think about your favorite movie, your favorite effects, whatever it is, and then you see a workshop come out with something that looks just like what you want to do, that's why workshops sell. And that's what makes them cool. So again, that's the number one reason why. It's a very strong argument for a workshop. Now, the other pro for a workshop is that it's often taught by high-level industry professionals. So if you think about really high-named people at studios, they often are the ones teaching some of these workshops, especially if it looks really cool, and it's often modeled after a movie or a production that they were part of. And from that person, you can learn some very interesting and unique techniques. Along with that, these workshops and these specific things are often very focused in on a particular topic. So if you're looking at a workshop that gets into water or gets into RBD, the person who's teaching that, if they are an industry professional, and if this is at a high level of visual quality, can often teach you some things that you won't find anywhere else, that are figured out during production, that are really great for more advanced users to pick up and understand. Also, some platforms can offer a degree of online community. So, often when you're just browsing YouTube or you're browsing side effects, learning materials, or whatever it might be, you might feel a little bit isolated. You might feel like you don't know who to go to for questions, or you might not know where to go if you want to interact with other people that are trying to do the same thing. The nice thing about workshop platforms is that you can get a degree of this community. However, I'll say that, as we'll find out later, this is not really going to make or break your success, perhaps, but it is just a nice thing to have. The ultimate experience when it comes to community is going to be university, because everything's in person, which is still the king of community if that's the experience that you're looking for. Last but not least, workshops are online, they're flexible, so you can watch the videos whenever you want. That can be a both good and bad thing, because some people really want to have that deadline to keep themselves accountable, but that flexibility can be nice, and it's much cheaper than college. Now, there are cheaper options than workshops out there that can get you to the same place depending on where you are, but compared to college, workshops are a much cheaper option to consider. Let's now look at arguments against workshops. And I'm going to give you my number one arguments right here. Workshops often prioritize marketing and the group experience before it prioritizes the individual artist. Now, I can tell you for certain that all of the major workshop businesses that come to mind, teach Houdini, they're going to start with what is going to sell and what do people want to make. When a new workshop is being created, the first question is, what do you want to see? Not what is best for the artist at this moment in their life, not what is best for this particular person. It's really more about what is it that's going to sell and what is it that's going to match as closely as possible to whatever you wake up being inspired by. Then, after that, it's all about creating a group experience to capture as many people broadly as possible within that particular topic. Then and only then is the individual artist's needs considered for what that workshop needs to be. And it's just how these things are made. Now, why is that a con? Well, it's a con because, in my opinion, it has its kind of backwards. I think you should start with the individual artist in mind and then think about how to market it and then think about the group experience when it comes to a particular course or workshop. And I'll give you an example of this. Suppose that you want to learn how to play guitar, right? And your goal is to play just like Trey Anastasio from Fish. With your lead guitar solos. I think it's great that you wake up in the morning and you love Fish guitar solos. I do too. But is that really the first thing that you should try studying when you're learning to play guitar? No, it's definitely not. You should probably try to learn some chords first and some scales, and you should probably do some things that aren't so flashy and fun so that you can build the skills and start learning some basic songs first. And then after you have some basic songs, you can start making some music that's more intermediate level, and then finally advanced until one day, maybe about 4 or 5 years later, minimum, you can actually play guitar similarly to a Trey Anastasio guitar solo. That's the same thing that's happening here with the workshops, where, yeah, the result's cool. I want to make that stuff too, but that's probably not what you should be doing right now. So what often happens is that a person who wants to learn Houdini is going to look at this awesome workshop, they're going to sign up, pay thousands of dollars, and then they'll go through the workshop and realize that I have no idea what's going on. And so then for, 12, 14 weeks, all you're really doing is you're just blindly copying clicks and nodes and parameters that you have no idea about because you're completely overwhelmed because it's way too advanced for you right now. And then by the end of the experience, Houdini is so hard because of all of these overwhelming things that just happened, and you're really not a better VFX artist because of it. Did you technically make the effect? Yes, you did, but do you know what you're doing? Absolutely not. That's what happens here sometimes with the workshop. And again, in the meantime, you've paid thousands of dollars, so the marketing worked, and the group experience might have been good for more advanced people in the group, but you as the individual most likely were left in the dust. Along these lines, because workshops are very result-driven, make this specific thing, it often has a way of being more focused on a particular project outcome, and that doesn't always provide a complete curriculum of beneficial skills. So if everything's always about the project, if everything's always about the end result, you sometimes kind of skip over some fundamental things that aren't about a specific project, but are important to all things in Houdini. So a lot of times you're not going to find a curriculum that's very structured and naturally builds up in difficulty. There is a degree of that. I'm not saying that doesn't exist. It's just not quite as strong, though, as what you might experience with online course curriculums or with a university curriculum, where things are really designed to be taken in a specific order, and it's not as results driven, so it gives you some time to think about the underlying principles of what's going on. Another issue with some online workshops is that industry professionals are often not the best teachers. Again, if marketing is the number one priority here, then having an industry professional is great because you can say, oh, learn under the best people in the biz. They're the most talented. They're the most awesome people. Why wouldn't you want to learn under them? But if you've ever listened to an industry professional try to teach, you'll realize that half of them are terrible at teaching. They might be good at whatever that is. They might be great at fluid simulations, but can they teach? That's a whole separate question. And if the point is to get you to be a strong VFX artist, then you can't have a teacher that doesn't know how to teach. It's a complete waste of time. So again, industry professionals may or may not have that skill, and often they don't because they've been busy being an industry professional rather than a teacher. Also, another con is that these cool projects aren't very useful in a professional reel, not as much as you first think it is, if you just copy them directly. In another weekly wrangle, we talked about a behind-the-scenes look at reels and resumes and what that process looks like when someone's trying to make a decision on who to hire. And I can guarantee you that we've all seen the different mainstream workshop projects at some point or another. I can promise you everyone's seen them. So if I see a copycat of that, it doesn't do you any good because it doesn't prove that you actually know what you're doing. It might prove that you clicked and copied someone, but who cares? If you're getting hired for a job, you want to get hired because of your skills, not because of someone else's skills. As far as pricing, workshops are kind of in this middle zone where university is often crazy expensive, often $100,000 or more if you want to go to one of the top colleges for it, or it's super cheap / free if you're just going with side effects, tutorials, or some online courses as well. Usually workshops land somewhere in the range of $1,000 to $5,000 if you really wanted to take multiple workshops and get some one-on-one mentoring and try to do the whole thing properly. That's better than college, but it's still not really that cheap either. So, like I said, it falls in the middle, and for some people, that's going to be expensive. I also want to mention that just because it's more expensive doesn't always mean that it's better either. A lot of times the best information is out there for free or it's available for a very reasonable price at the course level. And, well, the only way you'll find that out is by eventually trying it yourself. But believe me when I say that more money does not always equal better when it comes to education. Here's the other thing. If lectures are recorded live, then I can promise you it will lack the same polish and quality than a pre-recorded lecture has. The reason why is because when you're live, it's much more difficult to get the right take on something. It's much more difficult to consolidate the information in a way that is effective. As an example, when I'm making courses at CG Forge, about 50 to 60% of all the video footage I record is thrown out the window and trimmed down so that it gives you the information in the best performance possible on my end and in the most concise way possible so that you're not wasting time. And that's just not something you really get when you have these live performance recordings. And last but not least, this is maybe the most controversial point here. Quality is often inconsistent due to a burn and turn approach to hiring. Now, what I mean by burn and turn is that when workshop businesses approach industry professionals, often the way that they convince them to do hundreds of hours of hard work is through royalties and through a promise of, don't worry, you'll make up the money on the other side of this project. And what's going to happen, I promise you, is that there's going to be a lot of projections, a lot of generous projections that say, oh, well, if the course does this, then you can make that much money and you'll be making a lot of money for your time and all of that. Usually that doesn't work out. And what happens is that an industry professional is going to spend hundreds of hours. They're going to pay that up front. And then on the other end of making a workshop, it's not going to pan out as well as the royalties all sounded like in the first place. And then to keep them on the hook, they'll say, oh, if it's not performing as good, well, what are you doing for marketing? They put the pressure on the author to push out the content and to try to sell it themselves. And if it doesn't sell, well, then they just didn't market well enough. So it doesn't really take the responsibility for the blame if there isn't a lot of money on the other side of a royalty deal. And then it tries to guilt the person who made the content into thinking that it's their fault. And many of the workshop businesses know this, and many of them will still continue to promise to industry professionals that it's going to be great on the other side, as opposed to paying them up front for their time. Why is that a con for you as a student? Well, the con as a student is because if that's your approach to business, you're going to have high turnover, and that's going to cause quality issues where one workshop might be great, but then another one has a different teacher because they had to move on to someone else. Maybe that person isn't so great. And there isn't that consistency there to rely on when you're trying to make sure that you're making the most of your time. Again, this is not every workshop in every situation, but this has been known to happen. And it's something that you should be aware of with the workshop model because it is kind of specific to how workshops operate as a business. Let's now go back to the title of this video. Are workshops a ripoff? In my opinion, no, they're actually not a ripoff if you are a more advanced artist. But yes, I do think they are a ripoff if you're more of a beginner to intermediate artist because there's much better quality options for less money out there to help you get to a better place and to help you establish the fundamentals in a way that is better for your long-term health as a VFX artist.
Naturally, after I got done recording this video, I decided to go off and make my very first CG Forge workshop. That's not a ripoff for beginners. Why is it not a ripoff? A, because it's free, which is incredible. B, because it's more about the fundamentals as opposed to getting you all jazzed and hyped up about a specific product. And I often find, by the way, that most people need to spend more time with the fundamentals before they go charging off into making these incredible looking effects. You want to avoid as much as possible becoming a, monkey see, monkey do kind of artist. You want to be self-sufficient. And the only way that comes together is through a study of the fundamentals of CGI. And that takes a lot longer than I think most people realize. So it's more about that. And number three, the emphasis is still placed on you, the individual artist, more so than any workshop does. So, and this is something, by the way, that I do at CG Forge that I feel like is not as common elsewhere, where I'm putting the emphasis on self-sufficiency and you as the individual artist. You have a curriculum at CG Forge. It's all pre-recorded. It's polished to a level that you won't find anywhere else. You have exercises. You still have the ability to meet other people in the community and hang out with them. But at the end of the day, when you're trying to be a great Houdini artist, it's really about your ability to be self-sufficient and to be independent and independently thinking. And that's what CG Forge encourages you to do on a level that no one else offers. So in conclusion, workshops are a ripoff for most people if it's about the marketing gimmicks, and it's not a ripoff for people if you're more advanced or if it's done in a way that is aimed towards the fundamentals. And that's what I'm trying to do right now at CG Forge. That's just my opinion, though. More importantly, what do you think about this topic? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I hope you all have a great day.